to share with you some of the tools that are available for teaching and for research.
Is there a subsidy too available?
Yeah. You have to wait till the end. Many of them are actually free, so there is a subsidy already, and we'll see about the rest. We're all awake now. I wanted to share some of the tools that I've been using. I am not a master of any of them. So please forgive me if I can't answer your questions, or if this is not the perfect demonstration. I will try to highlight a variety of tools that are helpful and can be helpful to your particular needs. That being said, I have a personal preference. You might have a different preference. Whatever your preference is, there are usually compatible programs that are similar, slightly different, maybe even better. Then take what I'm doing and showing to you and take that as a possibility for you to say, I found something that I can use in a different system, in a different setting. Let's start with a word of prayer, and then we'll get right into digital technology. Dear Lord, as we look at how computers can assist us in our workflow so that we are more effective, using our time more helpful and more beneficial, and therefore better able to be servants of your word, we ask that you be with us this evening. In your name, amen. I want to show you, there's two aspects that we're looking at tonight, that is teaching and research, and I will look at a variety of programs that might help you, but I first want to look at a little bit of, this is kind of the overview that we're going to be doing, teaching and research. I've subdivided it into how to deal with presentations, grading, plagiarism, project management, that is in the area of teaching, and then in terms of research, note-taking or note cards, bibliographic resources, and then Bible software resources. And please take this as a workshop, not as a lecture. I have not prepared a lecture. I am sharing with you from my thoughts and my wisdom. If you have questions, please do interrupt. This is a workshop and not a lecture. So ask questions, throw them out. Let's do this together, and let's keep this lively. So please feel free to interrupt at any point in time. Some of the things that I want to consider or let you think about as we consider right at the beginning, what is software there and which software should you pick? Here are some of the main things that I would like to add to some generic things. Let me share some of the generic things. You want to take a software and work with a software that is established. If you are working with fringe or very small programs, the likelihood of them dropping off the face of this earth is very likely. I've enjoyed using WordPerfect in the past. Anybody has used WordPerfect? It used to be the best program for word processing, and yet the best word processor died. And that is one of the dangers that software has. Books don't have this. We have books from millennia past, and our books will, if Jesus does not come, will be preserved for another millennia. But software has the inherent problem that it will become obsolete at some point. Hopefully that's later and not earlier. So one important thing is don't focus too much on fringe, but on mainstream things. As much as I loved WordPerfect, I now use Word, obviously because it's the mainstream product. There are all kinds of other text editing softwares, but their longevity is always something that needs to be balanced versus their special abilities that they might have. You might save $1 here or $2 on some open source or free software, but it also comes with the possibility that the longevity might not be there as long as possible. So that's one generic thing. Obviously, there's always a question of price. But then there are also these new developments that have been added. Is something platform compatible? We have 4 major platforms, and that is Windows, Android, Mac OS, and iOS. Those are the 4 major operating systems in the world. Linux is, of course, out there as well, but that's more on the fringe and is usually compatible in some form or another. Why is compatibility important? Because at some point you want to interact with students and teachers, and many of the programs today are based on interactive use, collaboration. And so platform compatibility is something that should be considered in your process, in your consideration of software. And cloud integration, that is something that is becoming more and more important. You, of course, realize that with Office 365 versus the Office standalone package, or the iCloud system, or the Google Drive system, where you can share data between multiple users. We had a first question. Ephraim. I love Pages for some things, especially if I do anything graphic or with a template. I just love the way that works. But I don't think the integration of documents for research is as developed. And especially when you add in programs, as we're going to talk about bibliographic software, they are usually more focused on Word. So you'll have some compatibility issues. And so, yes, I like Pages, but only for limited amounts of work. For the research, Word just is the standard that everybody can work with. The problem is, if you develop a paper in Pages and then you want to share it with somebody that doesn't have it, then you have to convert it, and you're going to have difficulties with pagination and all kinds of font issues. And for that reason, I just think Word is still the preferred. But thank you for that very good question. You might have a different view on that, and I have friends that did their dissertation with Pages, so it is possible, but I think it's a little more difficult. Every software has a specific and limited purpose. Using the software outside of its purpose hinders learning. Every software, and that's why we're going to talk about multiple things, has a very specific usage that it's good at. But if we go beyond the philosophy or the purpose of that software, then we usually end up getting in trouble with the software. And so there's even a philosophical understanding of what is a specific software meant to do and what is it good at doing. I'm going to use an example right at the beginning of this, and that is teaching and presentations. Now, I'm not going to show how to use Keynote or PowerPoint. By the way, Keynote I prefer over PowerPoint because it's just so much better at visuals, and that Keynote is all about visuals, or the PowerPoint presentation. So in that case, I personally prefer Keynote, and I'm using a Keynote right now. But I'm not going to demonstrate that. You all know how to use that. And the problem is most likely that you know too well how to do that. That's actually more of the problem usually that I see in terms of software, how it's being used. The purpose for presentation software is to transmit complex information quickly. You can illustrate very complex issues with a single graph or an illustration or a complex quote. In my class, I'll use a quote from Herodotus, and that's a long, lengthy quote. People can follow along. I'm transmitting information, and for that, PowerPoint and Keynote is wonderful. But PowerPoint and Keynote are very bad if you just read off the screen, because then you're not transmitting information anymore. You're just repeating what is happening on the screen anyway. It is also very, very distractive, and you'll notice that yourself. If you have a PowerPoint running, then the visual cue, the light, the intensity, is all going to be drawn to the screen, not to yourself. So it is good at transmitting information. It is not good at transmitting emotions or thinking or analysis. And when we look at the idea of teaching, this is Bloom's taxonomy of teaching. We see that the knowledge is at the very base of this graph. That the old model would say knowledge is transmitted at the bottom, and then we have comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. We generally want to go in our teaching from the bottom to the top. Especially the higher regions are where we want our students to be, to analyze, to think through system, not just to know something. PowerPoint is very good at transmitting knowledge, but very little comprehension and none of the issues above. It does not lend itself at all to application and analysis in the usual way that we use it. If we take the newer form, where this taxonomy now reflects on what people actually do with that, then we say people should remember. But PowerPoints are actually very bad for remembering things. In fact, most students will not remember much at all. They'll actually say, and you might have heard this many times over, Professor, do we need to take notes on this? Can you just give us the PowerPoint at the end? So what has happened in class is that they are not actually paying attention anymore. They just say, I don't need to pay attention. I can phase out for an hour or 2 or 3. I'm going to get the material later anyway. I don't need to remember. I don't need to think through. I don't need to process. And so now I have students in my class that now tell me I've never taken notes. I don't know how to take notes. Students at master's level that say, I've never had to take notes. I've never had to process and think through what the teacher is saying. I just always get the PowerPoint. So I asked the student, have you actually looked at the PowerPoints? No. They just store up in some secret place on a CD or a memory stick or a hard drive and are never used again. So PowerPoints are good at transmitting information, not at making people think about that information. Yes?
The deficiency is not necessarily in the PowerPoint itself, but rather in the fact that they are usually shared with the students or with the people who receive the information through PowerPoint.
It's how we use it, that's right. And that's why I say the purpose, we have to think about what is the purpose of each software and use it for that purpose, not for anything else. So I'm using a PowerPoint presentation right now because I'm trying to illustrate a complex point that would have been very complex to explain, but visually it's a lot easier. So thank you very much. Yes, it's not, Keynote and PowerPoint are not bad, but the way we use it, we usually overuse these tools. So this is just a caution. You all know how to use and make PowerPoints, so we're not going to deal with that per se. Yes, Elder Wilson?
I remember reading somewhere, if you just read and tell them, they will remember only a very little person. But if you show the picture, the diagram, which is through PowerPoint, they will remember much more. So I thought we had a greater advantage in PowerPoint, but you are telling us.
Yeah, I don't know that actually in educational science, as I've been following along, these traditional views of the visual learner and the kinesthetic learner and the auditory learner are actually being discredited by most scholars at the moment. That's not the way most people actually work anymore. And they would say even a visual learner will learn auditorily. So we have to revisit some of those things. I would rather have people engage by portraying visual imagery by words. And notice how Jesus teaches. A man went out to sow. You don't need a PowerPoint. It's a visual image, but it is portrayed by words. And that is more powerful because it produces the thinking part, rather than just putting a picture up there. And that's why we would prefer reading to kids books rather than letting them watch TV, right? Books stimulate the thinking and the internal visual process rather than the external visual process. So I would argue that actually it's sufficient to speak if we can draw images and in people's minds rather than that. I didn't want to belabor this point. This is just an example to show that purpose is important. How we use something is for a very specific purpose. And if we use it beyond that, we might actually hinder learning in the process. I want to briefly touch on some issues and some points of grading. There are tools for grading. Moodle. Any of you have used Moodle or are aware of Moodle? Many of you are, and many schools subscribe to it, and you will get wonderful information there. I don't have a demonstration per se. It's usually very specific to a course and your university. They will set it up. Moodle has built into its system already grading systems, meaning you can enter grades into it and it will calculate and tabulate those things. It also has ways of actually grading papers or giving you an initial grade that you can then verify in the process. It'll actually do some of that grading for you, at least an initial run-through. Yes? Schoology. Yeah, there's I'm not quite sure about all the integration of things, but it's thank you for pointing that out. There are other options. Thank you very much. Now, Moodle is also an open source, so I don't know exactly what the pricing structure is for universities. If there is, it is an open source model. Where it becomes really interesting is when Turnitin is connected to Moodle, but I'll talk about Turnitin in just a moment, and so we'll keep that point for just a moment. What I actually prefer to use is Numbers, but you can also use Excel. Here I'm going to use Numbers, a Mac-specific program. I like that because the template that they have for grading is built into the program and is very easy and yet very powerful. Let me give you a demonstration of that. We're going to get out of this PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to my Numbers page. So here you see an actual table, a course. In Numbers, you can just get a new file. You can say, I'm going to open a new file, and here you have certain templates. You have something similar in Excel. And here you have a grade book built into the system itself, and this is just taking that grade book, and I have my students listed here. And in this case, they had several assignments. They had to read a textbook. They had to submit something. There was participation. They had to write a sermon. And then we had a final and a total. I enter the weight up here. How much does each represent in terms of the final, in terms of the total? And here it actually calculates this number by itself. So it's a check that I actually put all these numbers in correctly. You want to end up with 100%. And then it does all the calculation. You just enter the percentage for each assignment, and it does all the calculation by itself. Now that by itself is not the most amazing thing. Other programs do that quite well as well. But it, at the same time, also outputs your grade. This is something the computer does. It's not something that I added. How does it know what grade to assign? There's a separate little grade scale here. Here from 97 to 100, from 97 to 100, and then 92 to 93, and so on. You assign the grades. So it then automatically tabulates based on the entry that you have put here. It gives you a sample, but if your school has a different table, you can enter that accordingly, and then you get the grade range that you want to have, and then it calculates that grade automatically. It allows you to do comments. In this case, you'll see that we had a problem with plagiarism in this class, and so I made various notes, how much was plagiarized and how severe the plagiarism was, whether it was intentional or not, and then grades depending on that. And I could keep track by color codes whether the student resubmitted the assignment that I gave them a second chance on doing, or they did not. So I can track that record by color coding things, and that does not affect the rest of it. One other nice feature is that I can add a curve. Now, curves are helpful for various items. Sometimes there are differences in terms of difficulty of an exam. I do Greek proficiency exams on a regular basis, and I've realized over the years some exams are just a little harder than others. The text might be a little harder because we use different texts. So then a small amount of curving can be quite helpful. Sometimes if I have a student that helps me with grading, I also give an automatic and adjust by an automatic percentage because I didn't have all the time to read exactly every of the smaller papers. I read all the major papers, but some of the smaller papers I sometimes allow other people to, graduate assistants to do. And by a slider, I can now move the amount, the curve amount, and depending on that, it will change the grades for everybody in that column. And here you see how it will be distributed across that grade. So that can be a very helpful thing to quickly see if I were to adjust, how would it affect the class. For some of you that are interested in specific percentages, it automatically calculates the average for each of the assignments based on the performance of the student. So this is a very helpful tool that makes my grading a lot easier. I find this a little easier than Moodle per se, personally, because I can enter into this program a lot faster than into the web-based system, which Moodle is. So in Moodle, you'd always have to wait for the server to upload, sometimes between one assignment and the other. Here, this is all local, and so I can do this very, very quickly. Additionally, as all the programs, I talked about collaboration, here you can collaborate. So I can say I'm going to work if we have two teachers teaching a class, or if a graduate assistant is teaching, is doing some of the grading, I can say I'm going to collaborate this sheet, and the student can enter some grades, maybe the quiz or an assignment, a book review, did the student do it or not. Some assignments are just you did it, other assignments are graded based on the performance. And so students can help with that, and I can collaborate with students that would then help me. So this is the tool I use, and I find it quite useful. That was that. Excel can do similar things. I've just found that for me personally, the Keynote is quite efficient. Let me talk just a minute about Turnitin. Turnitin is a plagiarism detection software. It's not perfect. It's limited to online resources, not to book resources. So you can copy extensively from a commentary. If it's not cited by anybody else, Turnitin will not find it. But Turnitin is very good at finding things that are on the web. So on our school, we actually require every student to submit their papers in soft copy so that it can be entered. And actually, if you integrate that with Moodle, students can be enrolled in a course and then immediately just upload their assignments into Moodle, and Moodle sends it to Turnitin without having to go through a separate step. Turnitin can be used to detect plagiarism, and that can be an advantage for the professor, but also for the student. The student can see, did I do a good job? It doesn't just need to be punitive, it can be quite redemptive. Students can learn, especially in the early phases, oh, the software is detecting that I have some issues, that I'm not citing properly, or that I am paraphrasing too closely to the original source. And then it gives you a certain percentage, and the student can review that themselves and upload a new copy that has this improved. So it is a process where the student themselves can learn, and additionally Turnitin has a feature that already assigns a certain grade. So based on the grammar, based on that, not so much the content, but on the structure and the forms that it can assess the language and the use of sources. And it gives you a suggested grade. That can be helpful for the student to already give a certain estimate, an idea. Again, it doesn't look at the content, but on the depth of thought, but on the aspect of that. Let me give you a short view of that. This is just a browser, and here we can put, and I'm going to put the mic down because I can't do two things at the same time. This is Turnitin. I'm going to log in. If I remember my password. Yeah. So here's another little pointer. I use a password manager. because I can't always remember my passwords. So there's the password. Here I have some classes that I've added, and here you see that somebody submitted a paper. I can now go and view this paper. I'm sure you're going to keep some of these things private. Most of the people you don't know. So here is an example. Somebody had 30%. 30% is quite all right. 30% means that you have some Bible sources. You might have cited them actually correctly. You have some Bible verses. 30% is nothing to be worried about yet. When it gets beyond 30, then there is something to be worried about. So here is the paper without any markup. But if I click on this markup over here, now I see the places that the computer has allocated based on other papers around the world that have been used already. And here we'll see this is quite all right. Somebody else wrote exactly the same thing, and that is correct. This is not a problem. It just notices here is something that somebody else wrote in the exact same way. In this case, it's a bibliographic reference. There is no problem. The computer only detects that it's there. But no point of worry. Here we have a quote, but he has quoted it correctly. He's footnoted it. He's put it as a block quote. No problem. The software tells me it is there, but it doesn't say, I do the evaluation. It just gives me the information. It doesn't do the evaluation. I now look at it and I say that is quite all right. So it detects all of this, and then we can make a value judgment. Now, I've also had documents that have come back with 99% similarity. I've had documents come back with 100% similarity. Those are not okay. Even if they were cited, they would not be okay. Turn it in. Probably I don't know exactly. Our university has subscribed to it, but there are different plans for that, and I don't know the exact way how it works. You'd have to look at it. But it is a very, very valuable service. And again, for the students to acknowledge that ahead of time. And students have come and said, why did I get a failing grade? And I said, I'll send you this markup, so then I can just download it here. I download it with the markup, and I send it to the student and say, look, this is what came back. You tell me whether this is plagiarized or not. And the students will usually say, well, I've not had a student come and say, well, I think it's justified. No, the computer has identified it. So yes, then here is where it's founded. But notice that these are all internet resources. Okay, so that's why I said the purpose, again, is to compare available resources. There are many other places where plagiarism can happen. If you have a book that has not been cataloged in a library database or that other people haven't cited, then it will not find it. I've had confrontations with students where I said, I have the book here, here's your quote, and the student will say, but Turnitin didn't say it. Well, that doesn't matter. You still copied from a book. Turnitin isn't perfect. Again, this is where we talk about what can a software do, what can a computer, what is its purpose. So here it is to detect some things or help students. This blue section is where it gives you help for writing and where it assesses some of these other things. So these are additional helps for students. So this is a very helpful item for helping students, but also helping professors in dealing with the issue of plagiarism. And of course, we've been confronted with that even in our church recently. And so this is something we need to be aware of. I want to move on to the next item, and that is Trello, project management. One thing I've noticed is that there are a number of short-term goals that we have. That is, we teach from day to day. We have the assignments to cover. Those are short to mid-term goals that we take care of. But there are also long-term projects that we have to consider and keep in mind. That is curriculum changes, enrollment issues, whatever you have in your particular setting or in your particular field, and it might not even be teaching. I found Trello to be a helpful tool, and I'm exploring that myself at the moment on the suggestion of friends. And here I'm just sharing some that with you. I'm going to go to the overview. Here there are this is my Trello, and you can put, this is my personal board, and you can put various tasks here. These are, for me, long-range tasks, not the specific daily tasks. You could do a to-do list for every day. I haven't found it to be that helpful for that, largely because it's a online system only. It's not offline. So this is online. And so here, but for long-range things, this is very helpful. So here I have various tasks. I was asked to assess the faculty load on our campus, so I created this, meetings with various peoples, the areas that we have to consider, and then you can do all kinds of things in here. Some issues that we have to deal with at the seminary, my personal advising. Here I'll have my various students that I'm the main advisor for, the things that I need to do when I contacted them, what steps to take next, these kinds of things, and it gives me a nice overview. Where am I with these various people? Or my tasks in my position as the assistant dean. Here we have had some things to do with the editor, and so on, and I can put a number of things. I can add a short little note or an expanded note, and I can add, again, I can collaborate. I can assign tasks to specific people. I can say, you please take care of that. Especially if more people use Trello, then it becomes more powerful. I can import emails if I want to keep them on a record in this drop-down menu. I can even, as you can see, add dates here and say, by January 1, we need to have this completed, and it gives you reminders of that. Or a task list, something that we need to do. And so this is helpful to keep things sorted in your various areas of work. In this case, everything from my task as assistant dean to specific tasks that the vice president has asked me to take a look at, but also my personal issues, and they're nicely sorted here. You can change the colors. I've color-coded these in my capacity as an assistant dean, but then also in my personal area, and then we have accreditation coming up, so some issues that I took note of for accreditation. So this is a project managing, and I use it for the large goals that need to be kept in mind. The nice thing about Trello is it's available on all your devices, so you can have it on your phone, you can have it on your iPad, you can have it on your computer, and it synchronizes between all of them, so even if you're on the go, you can quickly have access to, oh, did I do that? Did I take care of it? Did somebody else take care of it? It keeps you informed on that. So that's a tool that I found for project management, the large goals. Of course, you can also use Excel sheets or to-do lists, and then you'd have to use hierarchies in them, but this kind of gives a nice visual thing for the large range goals. Yes? This is free, yes. This is available, except if you're a business that has 200 employees or something like that, and you want to use some higher-end, very collaborative things, then this is free. Yes, the personal accounts are all free. I don't even think there's a specific limit to the way you can use it. Yeah. Any other questions? Let me take a break here for the moment. Any other questions? Okay, if not, please keep on interrupting if you have questions. Yes?
Have you used Prezi, the software for similar to PowerPoint, but it's called Prezi?
I have not, no.
It's one that the features, you can organize the stuff having a center and then adding the different elements.
Mm-hmm.
It's very active, the way that presents the presentation. But usually
Okay.
I subscribe for a year. You can do it by month, or you can use the free version online. But I paid for a year, and then I didn't use it that much because since you have to be online, many times I have to go to places that there's no internet, so there's an issue. But I was wondering if you were having that one.
No, part of my style of teaching is that I don't use presentations. I'll use the Bible text. I'm a New Testament scholar, so I put the Bible text up there, and then I work with the class in translating the text. I prefer to have just the text there, and then we work with the text. If I deal with textual issues, I won't even use a screen. I'll just use a whiteboard, and then I'll underline and circle and highlight. I prefer using that more interactive style. So I don't use PowerPoints very much at all. Those that I visited various places, you know that I don't use PowerPoints, and that's because I want to engage people on an emotional level. PowerPoints can't relate to emotions. They're good for factual information, but they also distract because of the visuals. So I want to capture people in their thinking, and that's why I generally don't use PowerPoints. Only if I have a very complex quote, or if I want to have some class discussion, then I'll throw up 2 questions on the board, and I'll say, discuss this question in your group, discuss that question afterwards, and then let's debrief, and then the PowerPoint is off again. So my style of teaching is I want to engage the deeper thinking, or the higher thinking, the higher ranges, the critical thinking, the synthesis, the evaluation, more than the information. What I've found is that through the internet, information exists. The problem today is not that people don't have information. They go to Wikipedia, and they have a lot of information already. Whether it's right or not, that is the question. And that is evaluating rather than presenting information. The availability of the internet has made the transmission of information less important than the evaluation of information. And so that's why I find PowerPoints quite limited in what they can do. So that's why I don't use much personally, but that's a personal preference.
Another question is that when I was doing dissertation, I went to Nota Bene. That's a French, if you will, kind of word processor. But then I couldn't keep up. I ended up doing WordPerfect and then Word. But now I am deciding, I have been using the trial version this time of this program called Scribble.
Scrivener, yes. And there are many of them. There's a whole range of these. They have some advantages. Again, the purpose of each of these different word processors has specific purposes. Some of them are streamlined to say we're going to be as little distracting as possible. No formats, no complex menu bars, just write. And that's a very helpful idea. You can simulate some of that in Word or in other programs, text edit or some of these. Again, I'm always a little skeptical of these small programs that come and go. Some of them have a good history, have a long history, but I want to be able to use my documents in 10 years. Not just in 5 years. And that's where I'm personally a little hesitant. And one of my guiding principles was longevity of a company or viability of a company. And that's kind of the thing. We've had another couple, OneNote. Windows is shutting OneNote. A wonderful program, but wasn't as successful. Windows is shutting it down. We'll talk about BibleWorks shutting down. What do you do if you've invested largely into a specific software and then it dies? That's why I prefer to stay with mainstream if there isn't an important reason why I shouldn't, especially for documents like papers and all of that we need on a regular basis. If Trello goes under, well, I'll take the information and plug it in somewhere else. That's not as important. But for Word, personally. But I absolutely agree, Scrivener, there's a whole range. There's OpenOffice, there's OpenLibra, there's a couple others. I've tried some of them, but We'll get to Sotera in just a moment, but this is for writing. Sotera is for bibliographic references. Okay, I want to switch from teaching into research. So this is kind of the second half, and this is hopefully going to be even more helpful. These were pointers. And the first thing that I want to ask you and think about is your research. Where do you keep your notes? If I'm honest, I have all kinds of ideas that I've jotted on pieces of paper, and I keep these pieces of paper somewhere in some weird order, and I look at them a year later and they hardly make any sense to me anymore. There's an idea for an article, there's an idea for this or that. Oh, this would be a nice devotional for a class. And where do you keep your notes? Where do you keep your note cards of your research? Recently we've had, if you've been paying attention to some of the issues in the evangelical world, Kirstenberger had to withdraw 2 of his commentaries. And the reason for withdrawing his commentaries was plagiarism. Now, it wasn't blatant plagiarism. He and D.A. Carson are very close friends, and he had used, his graduate assistants had made note cards for him, but had not put the proper reference for these. And then when he went back to those note cards, he didn't cite those issues properly. And so in Zondervan and in Baker, his 2 commentaries had to be withdrawn. Not because he willingly plagiarized, but because his note cards weren't accurate anymore. And that hampered his research. So Zondervan gave him the chance to redo it and find the missing things, so we'll have an updated version of his commentary soon. But notes are really, really important. And you can go back to your early notes if you did good note keeping and use those later on. The old school method is having a pocket full of 3x5 or something like that, note cards, and writing things on a piece of paper. And if you do that, more power to you. Writing things down is a wonderful way, but mistakes can slip in. Quotes can become altered, page numbers can get off. How do you keep your notes? And do you have a good system for it? What about the ideas for teaching, for a class, or ideas for research, or even of responsibilities and solutions? So note-taking is a very important thing, and the question is, how do you do it? There are multiple options. Here there are only 3. There are actually more than that. Evernote, Citavi, and Wunderlist. Evernote we'll talk about in just a moment. Citavi I'll reference a little later, and Wunderlist is a kind of to-do app that helps you more with managing your time and all of that. Again, this is a small app, but it's quite popular. It's on your phone, it's on your computer. It keeps kind of the daily to-do list kind of thing, and for that, it is well known. There are other options. I use on my Mac, I use the Notes app. It's built into the computer program. There's a certain longevity projected with it because it's native to the operating system. It's also compatible with all my devices, so I can edit things on there, and it has recently become more powerful. In fact, the Notes app on my computer can actually do screenshots. It can do receipts. So last time I went to the Society of Biblical Literature and ETS, all the receipts I needed to hand in or that I wanted to keep track of, the books that I bought, I took a snapshot, it all went into one note, and there are all my receipts. So it keeps that for me. And Evernote does similar things. So that is very helpful for keeping notes. Just to give you a short view of that, here is my Notes app. By the way, this is today's presentation and some of the things I wanted to talk about and my notes for this presentation right here. But you'll see that there's a whole bunch of other cards, various things here, some issues for my trip to India, some things that I needed to keep in mind with, some others, some student-related things. Here's a scanned document, and so on. Questions that I have regarding personal issues. So it just keeps a nice list of these. You can make some of these private if you don't want to share them. You can collaborate. You can add tables. You can do a formatting here. It allows you to do that, and it is native to my computer system, in this case, the Mac. I wanted to show Evernote to you because that's also a very powerful and very prevalent system. Evernote this is the interface for Evernote. It allows you to take notes. So here there are all kinds of notes that I have also made and tried out in this program. You can create your own note cards and notebooks in which you group things together by tags. So here are some notes that I've taken from Sabbath school. I was sitting in Sabbath school, in fact, Dr. Dukhan's Sabbath school class, and I enjoyed some of the comments he made, so I took notes of these. So I collected them, I added a tag, and then it collects them in this group. There's also other things and a personal stack, so it collects these things based on the tags that you have. To show you, here's a clipping from the web. I thought this was an interesting article to take into consideration. This was created in 2015. And if you were to see the whole thing, here it has a tag of worship. So this would be in the worship stack over here. And this is just a news clipping. Here it is from The Guardian. This was an article in The Guardian, and I just said I clip it. And I added this. Some of the things I've added personally, or I have my personal things I want to. Here's an article idea that I created an article with somebody. Let me show you how it would work in Firefox. So in Firefox, you can, or Safari or any other program that you might have, let's say you go to any website, let's say The Guardian. Here you have this, and now you can have a plugin, here is a Evernote plugin. Because of the size of the screen, it's kind of moved it off to the side. Normally there's the icon right up there. And now I can say I want to clip this, and remember that, to my Evernote folder. So I can now say I want to do the whole article, or a simplified article. That means it'll take off the advertisements on the side, or I can do the full page, and then it'll include the advertisement at the top. Or I can just bookmark it, or I can screenshot it. So I can do a variety of things, and then I can add my tag so that I know this is where it needs to go. And then in this case, it's my personal folder, and then it'll save it once I hit it up here to my Evernote folder. Evernote is compatible, again, with multiple devices. The unfortunate thing is they have recently tried to gain more money out of the system. So now you can only connect 2 devices, not 3 or 4 as you were before. So if you have a computer, an iPad, and an iPhone, you have to choose between which 2. And also they started an earlier priced tiering. I still have the free version, but because of their changes, I stopped using it. So that's why you see my entry was from 2015. I haven't used it. Recently, I've gone more, even though the functionality of the Apple system is not quite as elaborate as the Evernote system. It has a longer longevity for me, and the benefits don't overcome the drawbacks. So I haven't used it much lately, but it is a very powerful tool if you want to use it, and it is free if you keep it to a certain limit. And those change regularly. I think you can only upload at the moment 20 or 30, I believe, cards at the moment, something like that. After that, you're in a priced tiering where you have to pay for it. So that's why I've personally used it less, but it is a very important and helpful use. So we've talked about 2, the Notes app in my computer, in the Mac system, and then Evernote, and we'll talk about Citavi and Wunderlist in just a moment. So these are ways to keep your notes. Barna, yes?
I don't know if you are aware of Biblioscape.
I am not. Okay, that's very helpful. That
It's not, I think it's not free. There's no free version anymore. But it's one of the best ones that I used to use.
okay. Let me get into Citavi because I think some of the functionality is similar and maybe there are still some things, but thank you very much for pointing that out. There's always something else that can accomplish some other things as well. So now we get to bibliographic references. That is, how do you organize your library? That library can be your physical library. I use that for my physical library. The books that I own, I want to have an overview of those. But it can also be about the books that you need for an article or for a document or for a paper, that presentation that you have here. There are 4 or 5 major programs. There's EndNote, Citavi, Zotero, Mendeley. But there are also some others. There's all kinds of smaller ones specific for the Mac and specific for the PC and all of those. These are the major ones. EndNote is used in universities in North America largely, and it's the predominant player there. Citavi is used in all the universities in Europe. I think there's not a single university in Europe that doesn't have a site license for Citavi. So these are some differences. What does it mean to, what is the helpfulness of bibliographic reference software? It helps students and yourself improve referencing. There is better accuracy, better consistency, you're faster, and even if you have a mistake, it's a repeat mistake and you can just fix it in the software very quickly. It organizes your library and it allows you to switch between different styles very quickly. I submitted an article recently and they said, we only accept Harvard style. Well, then you select Harvard style. Others say we only accept SPL style or Turabian or Chicago or whatever. And with a click of the button, you can just reformat your whole paper and your bibliography. And so you can submit that to journals that have various styles. EndNote has been around for a long time. Unfortunately, it's been spun off to a different company at the moment, and that has produced some problems. Citavi has been around since 1995. It's a Swiss-German independent company. 300 plus universities in Europe use that. Zotero is open office. You mentioned Zotero. That means it's free, but only to a limited extent. Because after a certain amount of references, you have to start paying for it after all. And then it becomes quite expensive. If you're within the limit, then you're fine. But if you go beyond that, then it's $10 a month or something like that. And that can become quite pricey. Mendeley is also free at the moment, but it was purchased by Elsevier Publishing House, and they are known for their very restrictive licenses. And they have been, it's considered an exploitative publisher, and Taiwan, Netherlands, South Korea, the academic institutions have collectively boycotted Elsevier because of their practice in the past. Bibliographic referencing has developed quite a bit in recent years. It used to be just you collected your library, but currently it is much more than that. Now you import something into your library, and you'll see that in the kind of beige or something like that, the import part, and then you have the output part, and that's the green part, and then you have the actual software that manages it, and then finally you have the dark blue or whatever color that is part, which is additional things like task manager, team sharing, organizer, here's the note card system, and the PDF annotation. And a sophisticated software will be good at a variety of these. You'll have an import plugin, an output plugin, and an online database. And here is a comparison of EndNote and Citavi and Zotero and Mendeley, why one is better than the other. EndNote is very expensive, but it is the only one that has a well-functioning Mac version. Zotero and Mendeley are only online-based, so that is a drawback. They are free, but they become expensive if you go over the current issue. The problem with EndNote is they only support the current version. If you have a version that is 1 generation older, there is no technical support. In fact, it doesn't even work with Word anymore. I will demonstrate that. I have version 17 of EndNote. They currently have version 18. And this is what you'll see, and they confirmed this. There is no patch, there is no support. I've contacted them personally. Let me open Word. The plugin does not work anymore. And here it is. You can't enter the EndNote CWYW site while you write, and so it has become almost useless for the exporting of bibliographic referencing. So for its heavy price, around $250 per single user license, it is very expensive and not that well supported. Citavi, on the other hand, is very well supported and is a very good program. Unfortunately, not available on a Mac. So that's why I have a virtual machine. Now we come to, why is Windows on my Mac computer? Here is Citavi. It's opening up. And Citavi allows you to do all these things. It has a wonderful reference software. It has a wonderful way of pulling things in. And I'm just going to use the demo version that actually they have. Wonderful. Let's see. Let's try that again. Almost. It has the three parts. Here we have, now we are here. Here we have Citavi running. You see 3 panels. Here is your library. Here's that individual book that you're looking at. Very often it'll have a cover art because it actually pulls in the book itself or the journal article, and then you have a little overview. You can also see detailed information about it. You can edit it. You can add to it. There's all kinds of things that you can do. You can find things online, so I can do a search. You can set up your own personal library. Andrews University is set up. So if I wanted to add Andrews University and I want to say I want to search for Andrews, then here is Andrews University, and I'll say I want to add this resource, and I'll search the database at Andrews University. So here now is Andrews, and I'm going to search for Revelation. What resources does Andrews have for Revelation? And now it'll be searching 1,164. It'll take a while to download all that. I can then select here however many I want, or even all of them, and incorporate them into my database. So that is as easy as you can get to add things. Now, I'm not going to do that at the moment. That's going to take a long while. So I can also manually enter a reference. Here I select which reference I have, and I can manually do it. But the nice thing is I can also add something just by ISBN. So I just use an ISBN number, and it automatically pops up as a resource. And then it's perfectly formatted right from the get-go. At least it should be. There's also another way to do that. The import, I talked about the import module earlier. So here if I open Firefox, let's see if I put it in Edge. Maybe I did. You can add, there's a picker, a little program, a little plugin that has been added. If I go to, I hope it's here, let's see. If I go to Amazon, no. What are you doing? There we go. If I go to Amazon, for example, and I look for a book, it should give me, if this is all set up correctly, let's say I'll look for Beale and the Book of Revelation, his commentary on that. We could do any other book as well. Here is the book. It should have a little icon here. I don't see it at the moment, so maybe something went off wrong in the setup of this. It'll have a little symbol, just like the Citavi picker up here, and then it'll just download the document right into your folder. So that's as easy. You just click on it, you find it, you click on it, and it imports it right into your database. So that's one aspect. You import and you collect your library. You can do full text searches, and it includes PDFs. You can search from in here, find full text, and you can find full text resources, especially if your library has purchased these items or made it available to you. The interesting thing is that I can now develop what you were referring to, Barna, note cards. So here's a list of note cards that have already been created. They're color-coded based on whether I created them personally or if I added an attachment. Here, somebody here in the sample, there's a PDF, and this was a part of this PDF. I can also go back. If I click on the link, it'll go back to where that original source was, namely this article right here. And down here in the corner, the blue highlighted item, we could zoom in on that. Let's see. The pickers are over here. We could go back to the original source. So you can collect that from a specific reference, or you can also just create your own. And now you can use all these note cards that you've created. So that's why I listed Citavi both in the note card system, but also in the bibliographic reference section. And I can create an outline. So here's an outline for a paper. And now you say, I want to use this resource in this section of the outline, and then you just drag and drop this item to the specific section that you want to add it to. So then you say, I want to add it here, and now you see this has changed from 2 to 3, and in this section we have these 3 items. Auditing examples has been added. So now I have all my quotes that I want to use. I select them, I write them, I take them personally, or I use them, I copy and paste them right out of the PDF, and I can create them in a paper. This item now, I can just export straight into Word, and in Word, I can just continue. It will format it appropriately for me, and I can now use the quotations right away. They will be in Word, and they will be cited properly. So this is a note card system, a bibliographic reference software, a task manager. You can now add tasks. You can assign that to collaborate, especially if you're working with students together on a project or with other colleagues. You can assign certain tasks. Please read this book. Here I found this article. I want to share that with you. You can do all of this in here. You can show how far this project has progressed, and so on and so on. So Citavi is in what I've looked at, one of the most powerful or the most powerful program. It's also very cheap, not just for Western countries, but especially for developing countries. Their developing country plan is, or for everybody, it's free if you have 100 or less resources per library module. If you have more than that, then you are in a paid tier. But if you're from a developing country, then I think the price is around $29 or $49, a very, very reasonable price. And you just contacted them and you say you're from a developing country, and they will give you that very, very special rate, which is about 1/10 of the price that EndNote costs.
29 per year?
No, forever. Yeah, they don't have a yearly system. They just have it's not a subscription base, which I really appreciate. I don't personally like subscription-based software. I'd rather pay a little more than...
They're expanding to other places. South America, they have a good support system.
They're developing in Africa. We, as a university, bought a site license for our whole student body. We have 800 students. We paid for 3 years $1,200. That is an incredible price. EndNote would have charged us $6,000 per year. So that would be a total of around $20,000 versus $1,200 for a much better program, with the one aspect that it is not Mac compatible, though they have promised that they will have a neutral version based on a browser, hopefully by the end of the year. So those of you that have Macs will not forever have to use emulator software. Okay, there could be much more that we could say on that. We still haven't explored the final aspect, so I want to move on if there aren't any other questions. And we return to our PowerPoint. That is the bibliographic referencing software. We've talked about the EndNote, and now I want to share a little bit about the last part, and that is Bible software for your research. All of us have to engage with Scripture at one level. That is what we are as Adventists, and especially as teachers, professors. We work with Scripture. Some of us are linguists and work with the biblical languages. Others are not, and that's fine. Software should help us all. There are two options out there. There used to be three, BibleWorks. BibleWorks closed their sales, and their support is very limited from now on into the future. If you have BibleWorks and you're close to retirement or are retired, that's fine. Just continue using it. The support will be sufficient for you to do that. But, and I've talked to some that said, you know, I'm close to retirement, I'm not going to switch, and that's perfectly fine. But if you plan on using software for another 10 years, it won't be around that long. The support, the next operating system will cancel out the ability for you to use it effectively. At the moment, if you do have BibleWorks, both Logos and Accordance have options of switching over for very, very cheap prices, so that you, if you want to, can switch over, just as a little note. So there are two options. Both of these softwares have many similarities. Both of them are compatible on all devices, Mac OS, Windows, iOS, and Android. Both of them. Both of them have the basically same concept, namely that there is a Bible aspect to it and a library aspect, meaning that the software contains both. The library, you can add as many books as you want to. I think, I know that Accordance caps out at, I think, $40,000 worth of books. If you want to do that, you can go ahead and spend half a fortune on getting their resources. So there's this library module, but you can start with very little. You just need to buy a single book. You can buy it just like a library, one book at a time, or packages. So both of them function the same way in that regard. How they continue to work is a little different. The basic philosophy is Accordance says we want it to be fast and quick. That's why we have it text-based. So we've converted everything into text, and that makes searching and accessing things very, very quick. Logos says we want to keep things graphic. So basically they scan a document and keep it as a JPEG, more or less. And so it's pretty, but it's a lot more intense on your computer usage, both on RAM and internet and hard drive space. Just two different concepts of how to do that. Let me demonstrate, and I'm going to close the Accordance that I have open at the moment, and I'm going to open Logos. I have bought both options, and I'm not endorsed by any of them. This is usually something that you'll find as you open Logos. Something needs to be downloaded, something needs to be synchronized, or something needs to be cataloged or updated. But once it opens, it has a very interesting and pretty overview. It gives you all kinds of neat little things. I call it the stumble-through approach. You get all these little things. Here you can look at a little video. Here you can look at a lectionary, a little something here and there, some pics from there. You can stumble through this. This is wonderful for church members that just, I don't know what I'm doing, I just want to read something. And then you stumble through. You go from one to the next, and kind of that kind of approach. That is the Logos approach. And this is Accordance. So this is the accordance version. I should have closed the virtual machine in the meantime, but such is life. Accordance, this is, I have several windows open at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each of them a variety of items here. So this isn't the home page. The actual opening would be this. It starts off with a very simple page, and that is just your biblical text and the info pane if you wanted to be there. Their philosophy is get you straight to the text, no fancy things all around, right to the text. This is what you came to do, so you know what to do. You are a scholar, you are somebody that knows what you want to do. We won't distract you with a lot of things. We want to get you straight to the text, and that's where we're going to go. Here there's one search bar that lets you engage with all kinds of things, all kinds of searches and everything you want to do. In Logos, you have multiple things that go on. Here you enter something. You can also enter something here. These overlap to some extent, but have also some unique features. If you want to go into Bible study, then you can either go into your library and select some items there, or you will want to go into your guides. Here is a passage guide, an exegetical guide, a Bible word study, a sermon starter, a topical guide. Each of them has different features, different searches, even different search algorithms and search languages. Some of them are Boolean, some of them are not Boolean. Those are the aspects. If I want to go to an exegetical guide, then it'll pull up certain information. If I enter a passage, it'll show me some of the textual variants. It hasn't pulled up the text yet. That'll usually come on the sidebar, but it'll give me some grammatical information and some word parsing for me. Accordance does this a little different. So if I enter the passage of Romans 3, then I have Romans 3 here. It gives me the text. It does so quickly. If I want to see information about it, I actually just scroll over the words and I get what I need to look at the moment. I can add parallel pane, so now I have the Greek text here, but I could also add the English Standard Version or any other version that I want to. If I want to look at additional information, then I have this info pane over here, in which I have commentaries. I can rearrange this in any order. I have my cross-references. I have specific topics, word lists, critical apparatus, and then I can engage with that, and you'll always see at the bottom, you'll see how it demonstrates it. If I want to see it closer, I just click on it, and then it'll actually open a window, and I can examine it in detail and get more information on each of these items. It'll give me Bible study tools. I prefer the Andrew Study Bible as if I'm going to use a study Bible instead of a commentary, then this is my first, so I selected this as the first and most important. So here it is, and now I can say on this passage, what does the Andrew Study Bible say? So it pulls it up. Also there are the grammars or various manuscripts if I want to look at textual criticism. Okay, these are the two different views. Just to give you an overview, and then we'll dive into some of the options, the detailed options. What are the programs good, and where are their strengths and where are the weaknesses? Logos is here on the right side, Accordance on the left side. Accordance is much faster in their use of their resources, both the RAM as well as the download speeds. Logos needs about, what I've, in my personal use, about 2 gigabytes of downloads a month that it needs to download to update their resources. Accordance is very good at biblical research. Logos is much better in their library. That's where their background is, and they have a much broader and bigger library. Specifically, they have a large SDA library. The advantage of Accordance is it has tabs and workspace, and I'll show you that in a moment. It's more accurate in its bibliography, not just in the way it cites the bibliography. So if you cite something in Logos, it'll actually give the wrong, in my opinion, the wrong dates. And students get very confused by that. The students will submit a paper and they'll say, I found a recent document, here's a commentary from 2014, and it'll say Schaaf's commentary. Anybody that knows Schaaf's commentary, that is a commentary from 1860. Well, why does Accordance give it to you as 2014? It's when they licensed it. So it'll actually be Logos licensed this in 2014. But it's actually a commentary from 1860. So that is confusing to students, in my opinion, and I have to always tell them, no, that's not accurate. You're not having recent things. If you want to do a historical study of how commentators dealt with the text, wonderful, use it. But if you want to do current research, that is not the way to go. Also, the page numbers, I found, are not always accurate. The advantage in Accordance is it has a single search syntax. It means there's just one way to enter a search syntax that is a mixture of Boolean and non-Boolean. There's Boolean, it's basically Boolean, but it has some additional characters to give you more diversity. In Logos, there's all kinds of different entry points and entry ways and proper syntaxes. And that makes it a little more difficult. You really have to learn the various forms of syntax in that. Let me show you tabs and workspaces and some of the features. Many of these you can replicate if you have Logos. That's wonderful. Use it. If you have BibleWorks, use it as long as you can. I prefer Accordance, and so I'll demonstrate some things. Some of these things you'll find in your own software if you already have a package. So then use them as best as you can. The first thing I want to do, and I'm going to look at my notes here, is start with the Bible module. And for those of you that don't have the languages, I'm going to start with an English version. So, well, actually, I promised the tabs and the workspaces first. Here I have a workspace, and you can probably see, if I do this, that I have a number of workspaces open. That means I can do searches. I might be doing a personal search, and you can see that. I've actually named some of them. So here, I'm doing a search on 2 Peter, research on 2 Peter 3, verse 12. That's my paper presentation coming up later. Here are some diagrams that I've been doing, a study on Peter, and some other things. Here's an overview. Here are some Greek texts that I've been working on. That was actually the opening that I had prepared. And if you want to see some of these others, here's a diagramming where I've done some diagramming here for John 4, verse 1. Each of these has a multitude of tabs, much like your browser does. So I can work on multiple things at once, and I can scroll through these just like a browser. So I can be working on a project personally. I can be looking at, in my case, a dissertation or a class preparation, and I'll just open a new workspace. And I can do multiple projects at the same time, and I can go back and forth between them. If I want to do a word study on a text, I'll open a new window, and if I want to do a second word study in that same passage and see where they correlate, I'll have 2 extra workspaces, and 3, depending on what I need, and I can compare that. Logos does not have this ability. Logos has a single window. This is what you have. If you want to change the text, then you basically have to change that, and you lose the previous information. Now you could save that as a search, but then you'd have to go back to a previous search. You can't just interact with it. It's a one-page kind of thing. It's going back, in my opinion, a little back to the Netscape days, when there was one browser window, and if you wanted to switch back and forth, you used the history back and forth, but you couldn't have things parallel to each other. And that's one thing I really like, because I guess I'm a little bit of a messy person to have this many windows open at once. So that was relating to the workspaces and the tabs. Let me now go and demonstrate some of the things that might be helpful to you. Some of you might not be astute, and you might be in applied theology or systematic theology where the languages aren't as important. Let me just open an English version. So here we have an English version. I could take any text. Here we add our instant details. And as I scroll over that, it actually gives me not only the English word, but actually its Hebrew background in this case, because wherever we are in the flood narrative. We have the passage on the flood. So it gives me the Hebrew word underneath it. If I now search for something, then I can search for two things, the word or the key number. If I search for the word, then it actually searches for the English word, in this case, determined. But if I search for key number, it searches for the Hebrew word that is behind the behind the English word. So I can do a Hebrew or a Greek search, a language search, without actually having to know the language. And probably I'll find, in this case, that if I search this, the word is used a little different in different contexts. So you'll see that it doesn't just say determined all the way through. If I were to search instead, and I'm just going to do this multiple tabs right now, if I'm going to search for the word itself, now I'm just going to find all the words in English that are determined. So this is already a huge improvement to your ability to relate to the biblical text. If you just use a concordance, then you're just going to find the English words that are used in various contexts. But here you can now actually, without having to know the biblical languages, search the biblical languages and work with the biblical languages. If you need to find anything else, you find the whole parsing right there, even though you're still just in English. So this is a wonderful tool that I find incredibly helpful, that already gives a much better understanding of the text. One example of that is Paul uses the word diakonos, and sometimes it's translated as minister, sometimes as servant, and used in different contexts. Why? Why was it translated this way, that way? You search for the Greek, you find all of the references, and that gives you a much better understanding of the term. So this is the English searches. If we go back to the biblical searches, you can do many more types of searches. So in here, I can now search for the lexeme, or the inflected, the root, and the tag. We won't go into the details. You can go into specific ways of searching for things. You can also go into complex searches, where you now add multiple things. So then I just enter various things. I might want to search for agape. So I enter just with English words, English letters, and you see immediately as I pull this up, it gives me English equivalents, and I can actually select from this list what I want. I can write as far as I want to, but here I will enter this, and now I get a list of things. These words are now highlighted in red. I can now do a diagram and say I want to see how that relates in Scripture, and so I can do a graph. Here's the graph, so I can see how is it distributed in terms of how often does it appear. And obviously, 1 John is going to be the place where agape appears the most. So I get a very graphical interface, and I can interact with that. And now click on this, and it'll bring me right to that passage. In this case, I was just a little next to that. If we go a little further, here we are in 2 John. So I can interact with that. I can zoom in and out and all of those things. I can also look for specific details of it. I can search for masculine and feminine and all of these kinds of things and see the dispersion of that. I can see where one word is and where the other word isn't. I can add multiple and interact and overlap these multiple searches so that the text becomes helpful. Here we are back at our text. There are additional things that I can do. Over here, you've already seen I have the info pane. That gives me quick access to my preferred commentaries. Again, this is the library that you can create over time. Here is my library. There's everything from syntax forms to dictionaries and commentaries right here, and you can go crazy with all the available material. Here again, Greek lexicons, Hebrew lexicons. Then there's pastoral, visual items that you can use for PowerPoints if you so want to. There's a huge variety of items. One nice thing is if I triple click on a word, 1, 2, 3, it'll lead me straight to a dictionary. In this case, my preferred dictionary is the BDAG. And now I have the entry for that word with a triple click. That quickly, I've opened a new book. If I instead want to go to a commentary, I just need to click a single click on this commentary, and I can rearrange all these forms however I want to. If I would prefer to have these side by side, then that was a bit too far. No, come on, move over. We go back. I can rearrange them, especially if it's not on a projector. Let's do this, and now I can pull this up and add this up here, and I can have it in parallel. I can add new resources if I want to study something else. One of the things that is a helpful tool is the timeline. This gives us a nice overview. In my library, I can pull up the timeline. The timeline shows me all the events that have appeared in history. Here's a list of all of history. You can select whether you want a conservative or a critical view. That will change when Moses left Egypt, for example, with the Exodus. Hello. There we go, mouse froze. And now I have all these various countries. Here I have the Israel-Palestine, I have Egypt, I have Persia, and all their activities that they have done. And we have rulers, prophets, individuals, writings, events. So if I look for something specific, here we have various rulers of the dynasty in Egypt, and then we can correlate how that works with various events. So if we want to look at the event of the Exodus, so here we are at 1450. We go to, here we have the entrance of Moses. If I add the, oh, we're in the critical, yes, sorry. Here we have the Tel Amarna letters, we have the book of Joshua, we have Moses right here. If I add the instant details, and I have it just in the overview mode, then you would see the exact dates that Moses lived. We have the various rulers and the writings, the book of Judges, when it was most likely written, all of these events, and we can correlate that with different events at different times. So that's easy and helpful to get an overview what happened at a specific time. Any of these, if I click on them, they will open up a dictionary. So now I have a dictionary and I can explore this dictionary and see what do I have. I can change to various other dictionaries, Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary, the ISBE, and other dictionaries of your choice, whatever you want to prefer as your default one. So that's a very helpful thing. Another helpful thing is you can use an atlas to see how does it relate to biblical times. So if I'm here and I want to explore a specific setting, let's say Genesis 11, we have a specific reference, of course, to Shinar. So now I can say I want to look this up, and I'm going to look this up in a map. So now it'll open up a map module. Here's the map, and here's the whole region, and now it'll here specified in red. In this case, it's replaced it with Babylonia. So this is the region that we're talking about. I can overlay this with all kinds of things. Here there are helpful tools to make you aware of the road system or other systems, even if you want to look at specific items. Here's how did the Philistines arrive. There's diagrams and maps to help you. Or if we want to know what was, let's remove that, what was Paul's missionary journey. Here we have a list of events that have been added into this module. So Paul's third missionary journey here is retraced in various steps, so you can follow along as this is developed and how Paul moves from one resource, from one place to the other. You can also do and this is unique to this program, you can say I want to do a 3D view of a specific area. Now you can see geographic regions. This is interesting if you want to look at Jericho or the area of the Philistines. Why are they limited to that area? Why don't they expand? Or why don't they move any further? Anyway, you can move this around, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can turn it to get a better view and to help you understand the text more fully. These are small but helpful tools to assist in your research. For those that want to do some linguistics, there are helpful tools in terms of parallels. If you want to look at the synoptic parallels, then we just go to the parallels. Here's the gospel parallels, or the synoptic parallels according to different versions. If you take the aspect here, then we take a Greek text. Where do we have the NA28? And now I have the various passages, and I can do a textual comparison of the various events in a parallel version. If you prefer to have a interlinear version, let's get rid of the timeline, the library module. I can add a interlinear, or change this into an interlinear. I don't use this very often. Where was that again? Here it is. Show interlinear. So now I have an interlinear version, if that is helpful to your resources. So these are wonderful tools. If you want to add complex tools, or complex searches, then you can do construct and visual searches. So then I say I want a specific word, and I can specify what that word is, and I want it linked within so many words to another word and limited by this amount. I want to range it and say I only want this to occur in Mark, or I only want to have this occur in Genesis. I can do some of these things. One thing that I want to, you can highlight, you can do some of these things. Just to show you an example of a highlight. Here's a highlight for Mark chapter 7. And I need the NA27 because that's where I highlighted this in. These highlights correlate with your version on your iPad or your version on your iPhone. So these help. I can't find it at the moment. We'll skip that. But coming back to the question of notes, how do you keep your notes? This is a feature that is unique to Accordance and is incredibly helpful in my opinion, and I've worked with this recently on my paper. So here I have a passage, and I want to remember this. I want to use this in a paper. I quote it. I want to remember that. So I add this to a stack or a note card. I can open a new stack, and I'll just name this test. And now I have a note card system. So if I open the stack, here is this passage that I've cited. Now it has all the information. It's also hyperlinked. I can add my own user items. I can write down this is a quote, and I can remember, or I can make personal notes. I can add a dictionary. So maybe I've open up a dictionary here, and I want to use this word, and I want to highlight this. Here's a section. So again, I say I want to add this to the stack. And now here we have that section. These things I can now just copy and add them to my Word document. So I go to my Word document. I'll open a blank one here, and it'll give me that whole passage. And here it is. So now I just need to put my quotations around it, format it little bit to the appropriate thing, to the appropriate format, add the footnote, insert the footnote, and here already I have my reference. I just copy and paste that into the footnote, and I have my footnote. If I want to do that again, I can do that for any of these passages. Here I'll use this. And now I'm doing the same thing again. I'm using this note card system, and I can use various resources that I've put into that, and it gives me a nice overview of all the things that I need to look at and take into account. So here's the perfect, correctly formatted item with the correct date and the correct year number, page numbers. Even if you want to go into the passage, you can see in this document, let's go to this passage right here. You see that here it says Mark, page 245. This is the top of the page. So in this electronic format, while it allows me to change the formatting and the spacing, it'll always show me the top of the page. So the word made is the first word on the page 245. So that way I always know what page I'm on exactly, and it is exactly the same between the book and that makes your research very, very easy and helpful. I can also do that without the stack. I can just say I want to copy this as a citation or as a bibliography or as a quote. I can transliterate right from here. Let me translate it, copy it as a bibliographic reference. So then I have my bibliography here on the subsequent page, and I add this, and there is the correctly formatted version along with a hyperlink. So these are tools that will really help you do your research much quicker if you have these materials and they're available to you. Yes? The way both Accordance and Logos work is that you buy a license for yourself and your family. I think they say around 5 computers is fine, because that's usually the 5 devices is what a household will use, and they are specific to you. One thing I found is that Accordance is generally a little bit cheaper, for the most part, than Accordance. If you want specific resources, then you can wait for specific sales. They also have a discount always available for pastors or for teachers, for missionaries. And for those of you that are in developing countries, they have a very special price for developing countries. The developing countries is $29 for a very basic package, $99 for the Greek, the Hebrew, a dictionary, and some basic commentaries. $199 gives you the Septuagint and all of that. In terms of pricing, they're usually much cheaper than the hardcover books. If you're not in a developing country, then the price are a little higher. But they usually have, 30 or 40% of the collections at various times of the year, and then it depends on what collection you want to look at. Okay, yes. Since they use a proprietary format, just like Logos, you can't import things into the program per se. They're working on a PDF version that you can import certain PDFs. But the big news for this conference is Accordance has SDA resources. They have all of Ellen White's writings, and I have a document for you here. I asked both of the vendors, both Logos and Accordance, to provide me some information for you. Accordance gave me a flyer for you. I didn't hear back from Logos, so this is not because I am partial, but I try to be as impartial as possible. But I do have around 30 flyers here. If you want to grab a flyer at the end with the resources that I've added at the moment are AU Press. If you want to have Dr. Stevanovich's Revelation commentary, The Lost Meaning of Sabbath. If you want to have Gully's Systematic Theology, all available on Accordance now with a special introductory offer, along with the SDA Bible commentary and Ellen White's writings and additional material. If you want to pass that around, this is the great news. It's not available on the webpage yet, but it is available here. So this is the grand reveal, I guess.
In response to a question that was raised earlier regarding the
The same is true for Accordance. In that sense, they're equal. If you are in a non-developing country, you can use payment plans and just charge it to your credit card on a monthly basis, and use the resource that you have. Now, you can also, if a package is too expensive for you, you can also just buy the resources that you want. When I started with Accordance, I bought the Greek New Testament and an English version, and that was it. I didn't have more money. And over the years, I set money aside, and I added this, and I added that, and then it was cheaper to add a package, so then I added a package, and then they had a good sale, and then I bought the whole Word Biblical Commentary for $220. I begged my wife, and she granted me to purchase the NICOT and NICNT 1 month ago. NICOT and NICNT, all 60 volumes or something like that, for $599, usually around $3,000 or something like that, if you bought it in hardcover. I do a lot of begging with my wife, yes. So, yes, that wasn't cheap, but it was a very worth it. They have packages. If you want to go to their website, accordancebible.com, they have all kinds of packages. You can see they have a kind of a commentary direction, that is the English section, then they have Greek, and then they have a Hebrew section. And then they start off with a level 1, and then a level 2, and a level 3, and a level 4. But you can also do individual purchase, whatever you need for your resources. If you need a contact, my personal contact for Accordance is, I guess they have contact information there, orders in. So you're welcome to contact them. If you have specific questions, you're welcome to ask me. And especially if you're from a developing country, there's no cheaper way, both for your computer and for your pocketbook, than Accordance, because Accordance gives you this developing country special. That doesn't exist for Logos. Yes, questions? Yes. Yes. If you want me to show you, you go into Preferences and then into Style, and then you can use whatever style you want to. Yep. You can export to whatever style. I have SBL style, but you're welcome to use whatever you need to. Yes, you can specify the style. You can use, my default Bible is the Greek, so when I open it, the Greek text shows. But if you want to prefer the ESV, the NKJV, the Message, the whatever, you're welcome to use any of those, and you just specify it once, and then from there on the computer knows how to do that. So Logos has a basic version that is free. It's very limited. Accordance has a basic version that is also free. Logos calls it basic. Accordance calls it light. Both of them have free entry versions for you to try it out. For who we are and what we do, we need more than the basic, but it's a great way to try out the program and see what works for you. So yes, you're welcome to try that out, either way. But these softwares help us to be more efficient, quicker. They get us to the books more readily. Let me give a word of warning again, purpose, right? We talked about purpose. What is the purpose of software? Software is there to make searching easy, Bible software, not reading easy. And this is one of the dangers I find with students that rely only on software. They say, I just searched this, and then they come with Hermeneia commentary. And I say, you know, that's fine that you're citing that, but do you know the background? Why did it? I have no idea. And then they'll treat this commentary and that commentary equal without knowing the background, without knowing the assumptions that somebody has towards authorship, dating, and all of that, because they didn't read, they just searched. And that's the danger of software. Software is amazing for many things. It's not there to give you a comprehensive guide. Neither one of them. Now, they both have apps. In both of them, you can flip through books, and that is probably the closest you can get to reading. And yet, nobody enjoys. I've never had anybody say, "Oh, I prefer reading on a screen. My eyes just feel so much better when I stare at a screen." Nobody has ever said that to me. So I think books are incredibly valuable still today. for their longevity and for their ability to read. I prefer working with books, but there are specific places and times when the software is really, really helpful. The stacks function is wonderful, and I've used that for my papers. I can put 100 different things there, and I can quickly go back to my resources. I can add my own. So there are wonderful options that you have, but I wouldn't give up literal books. Dictionaries, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who wrote that dictionary entry. That's not really important. So for dictionaries, this is the most amazing thing. A triple click, and I've saved myself looking through the TDNT, the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, 10 volumes, or even worse, the Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament. By the time you find it, you've spent 20 minutes looking for, or I might be exaggerating a bit. Now you can do it with a click of a button. So dictionaries, Bible text for the searching function are highlighting. Diagramming, I just briefly showed you diagramming. Those are wonderful options to display the text and make use of our resource. And that will make us faster and more competent at our work. Even if you just do it in English, you still have the ability to use the Greek and therefore be a better scholar. So I encourage you to think of, if you don't already have some form of software, I think today this is almost a necessity if we understand it within its limitations. And the prices are really reasonable, especially if you're a developing country, then you're starting at $29. That's not that much. That's 2 pizzas here.